Oh, there you are. Welcome back to the Leveling Up podcast. Today, this is going to be a great story. I'm calling this Surviving the Set or Gust and Goop'n'Shtick. You're probably wondering, what the heck is a Goop'n'Shtick? Is that a stick? Is it goopy? What is it? You're going to find out. I'm going to paint the picture for you. But before I do, I wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of why I'm doing this in this exact way. I'm going to share with you a great story. But the reason why is a lot of people only focus on giving content that is general, that is generic, that literally anybody could share. But if you want to have a really confident set, I believe that if you can share your story in a way that's engaging, that builds your confidence and allows others to connect with you, everything shifts specifically for your audience, but also for you. Your confidence is increased. Now, today, I've got a great quote for you. This is one that came out of Speak Like a Pro. I thought that Dan Clark did such a phenomenal job on that book. Very simple, and it's easy to understand. This is the quote. 99% of the population is afraid of public speaking. Of the remaining 1%, 99% have nothing original or interesting to say. I believe that if you share your story and you do it in an interesting, engaging, confident way, that right there is going to elevate everything that you do in speaking, in storytelling. This allows you to really connect deeply with your audience. It touches all of the different elements. So let's dive right into here. What's Goop'n'Shtick? You first need to know what this is. A few years ago, I was working with my smoking hot brand new wife, Belinda, over here at the Tuacahn Amphitheater. Let me paint the picture of what that looks like. It was Red Rock, St. George, Utah area, lots of desert heat. It kind of felt like if you were an ant under a magnifying glass, you would get crispy all the time. I think ants over there, they may have started out white, but they definitely end up red. I was painting at this theater. Absolutely loved this experience because you always felt like something was happening, because whenever you started your day, you would add different paints and things to the set pieces, and you could literally see your progress. It was beautiful. Sometimes we would paint something, and then you'd have these visitors come up, and they would look at your base coat and the colors that you chose, and they're like, well, is that what you were going for? Is it supposed to look like that? And we often would just say, well, it looks way better under the stage lights. Or we'd say, like, yeah, I think it looks great. Here's the thing about painting sets and stage painting. The base color and base coats, usually they're white, right? They have a primer. You'll have a Goop'n'Shtick. That's the type of primer that we like to use. We call it that nickname because you goop up this like viscous, like very thick, painty primer. You'd get that and you would stick it onto the set piece. You'd goop it and stick it. So that was our primer. We'd have it with white. And then sometimes when it was a base coat that wouldn't be seen, we would do this amalgamation of 4 or 5 different colors, whatever was extra, and you dump it all into one big bucket, mix it around, and then you have your color of the day. The part that doesn't actually matter because it just needs to fill in those cracks. Now, when you had those people come and walk up here, they would sometimes have like this mauve or this really puce color, usually some type of baby vomit color in some way. Anyway, as we were painting these, you have to realize that base coat, it takes a lot of work. I remember anytime that you look at the set pieces, you have to fill in a lot of cracks and crevices. And as you're doing that, you have to cover the entire piece because the stage lights will find any bright white. You put the white on there, then you're like, now I have to get color on this. So as I was putting the paint on there, you think about going the final percent. You've heard me say this expression over and over again. Going the final percent is making sure that you finish what you start. You do your very best with what you have. Going the base color and then not finishing it with the final details, that is the equivalent of starting a journey and not finishing it. So here's the analogy. We've got all of these base coats on there, it's pretty ugly at the very base, at the bottom on that foundation. But as you start adding specific colors in those areas, it starts to take shape. And you'd paint that set piece and you'd add details. And just like when you're painting a brick, if you only have the rectangles and you don't really focus on the details, it looks flat. It just looks like a rectangle. But as soon as you understand some of those tiny details, you add highlights and shadows, you put the 45-degree angles on those edges, then it pops out of the background and it's beautiful. You can look at marble. You take these cardboard pieces and you smack them onto this pillar and you spray paint, or you'd take your airless and you'd spray those, and you get these different textures that from 30 feet away, you might not even know that those little details are there. But when you're on the first few rows, you can definitely see the intricate details, the spattering, which is those tiny little dots of color. That is going the final percent. It's not just getting the gist, not going 90 or 95 or even 99%. You complete it with those tiny little details. Now, I was on this day putting on some Goop'n'Shtick. That is that nasty, thick primer. Flopping it on there on the 4 or 5 feet up on a ladder, smacking that in there, getting it into all the grooves, and making sure that this entire set piece was primed, because it bakes under that Ivins sun. Ivins, Utah. It's one of the hottest places I've ever lived. As I'm doing that, a gust of wind comes up behind another set piece. And you need to know something about these set pieces. They are not tiny little things that you have a scrawny stagehand lift up and bring on stage. These are massive steel structures, ones that are welded together, and then we use different types of mesh or wood that's very light so that you can maneuver these, and we keep them as light as possible. But sometimes they're about as heavy as a silverback gorilla, like 500-ish pounds. And you look at the way that they're constructed, we want to have the wind be able to go through them. Well, on this day, we didn't anchor them quite right, because I was on a cement patio right outside the regular scene shop. It was the smoothest area, super easy to roll it around and maneuver it, even for one person. And I either didn't have one of the brakes on or the second brake, but it wasn't anchored properly. That gust of wind came up. It picked up that piece just slightly, enough that it ricocheted with the wind off of one of the set pieces and pinned me against the other set piece that I was on. Now, in that moment, I got wedged between these two set pieces. I was thinking, oh, shoot. I'm like a cartoon character. I don't have any ladder under me anymore. And I just kind of spun there, just like, you know how when a cartoon character walks off the edge of a cliff? That's how it felt as I was falling downwards. I had this big 5-gallon bucket of Goop'n'Shtick, that white primer, that fell over. I land on my back. The other set piece keeps rolling down the hill, and I'm covered in this warm, viscous liquid. My back is throbbing. I feel discombobulated. Looking around, you should have seen the panic on everyone's faces as they came up to me. I wasn't sure if I was laying in a pool of my own blood or 5 gallons of that Goop'n'Shtick. But my wife comes up, and the concern on her face, she very gingerly flops me over. I'm starting to eat dust a little bit as she's checking me for wounds. Luckily, I only had like a cheese grater effect across my back, and I didn't have tons of blood, but my back was so sore. Took off my shirt, got all that paint off me as best I could. We drove to the emergency room. And the thing is about the emergency room is they're pretty used to seeing all this stuff. You show up covered in paint. Like, my face was all covered in that white stuff. My hands were washed as best I could, but I was super gross, sweaty, sticky, sitting there. We see the doctor. He looks at my back and he kind of asks me all these different questions. So what were you doing? I'm like, well, I was I was painting, I was Goop'n'Shticking or, priming the set. It's like, oh, okay. And what happened? Oh, I was pistol whipped by a set piece. Pistol whipped by. What do you mean by that? Well, it like came back and whapped me really hard in the back. I felt like I got backstabbed, like Julius Caesar by a set piece. It just, tu brute. And as I was laying on the ground, I was like, am I going to be paralyzed because of this? Luckily, the doctor's like, well, after looking at everything with your back and seeing these bruises, it's just superficial scrapes. You're going to be fine. You'll need to get some ice and you'll be okay. My pain, I was just thinking about this. My pain is just superficial. I got over it by the next day because I had to. We had to go back to work the next day, had to finish the set. We only had 2 or so weeks left. We had 3 weeks total to paint the entire set, make sure that everything for 3 different productions was painted, put together, and presentable for our performance. That's a lot of P's. But you don't have time sometimes to think, will I get back out there? I had to make that choice early on to get back out. While we were driving back home, Belinda and I were talking and just thinking of how lucky I was that I didn't die, because if it would have had a little bit more zip to it or was a little farther away, I could have been speared in a way that killed me. When she was in high school, she had 2 set pieces that pinched just her ring finger, ripped off the tip, threw a bunch of blood all over, and it changed her musical career. She wasn't able to play the clarinet anymore because of it. But that little accident eventually turned her to focus more on theater. And if she didn't focus on theater, we wouldn't have met at Snow College and wouldn't have been able to develop that deep relationship. So you think about this. Sometimes we have accidents in our life. Not sometimes, often. But as we get these accidents, we get to say, how am I going to respond to this? Am I going to just lay there in that pool of Goop'n'Shtick? Or am I going to get up, dust myself off, go to the emergency room, figure this out, because I've got work tomorrow. I've got stuff to figure out. As you look at any accident that happens in your life, don't focus on comparing it to other people. Compare it against yourself. All of us have these opportunities, these unique stories that are in us. And as you do your very best to make them real, to make them meaningful, it changes everything. And we just had a comment come in. I wanted to make sure we got that. Oh, no worries. Thank God you didn't get hurt worse, right? Thanks, Cody. This is the main thing here. Whenever you are speaking, if you can really dial in your story, it creates that original experience. No one else has my story. No one else has your story. And as you focus in on the things that matter to you, you focus in on what is it that's going to make this meaningful, visual for your audience, that they can feel it, they can see it, they can hear it, they can touch it, all of those elements. It changes everything about how you are perceived, because you're not just regurgitating other people's stuff. You spent the time to craft your story and find something of value in it so you can give it to somebody else. And that's the key. Today, I hope you got some value out of this specific story. But before I go, I wanted to give you this last little quote. This is by Dan in a book called Speak Like a Pro. He says, the speech doesn't give you credibility. Your life does. You think about all the different things that we experience. You have thousands of stories. And if you don't take the time to write them out, to develop them, to perform them, they're going to go along with you when you pass and you get to go 6 feet under. All of us get to pass away, but not all of us get to leave a legacy. You leave a legacy with every story that you share, every insight that you write down and share with somebody else, every book you write, all the songs. Don't die with songs in you. Don't die with your story still inside. I challenge you and I implore you today, figure out what is that story that you've been telling other people that you haven't really been able to flesh out yet, that you want to be remembered by, the legacy style stories. And I challenge you to go write it down. Make it something that your kids or your kids' kids will look back to and be like, whoa, That's awesome. I'm so glad that that wasn't me on that ladder, but you can learn. You can be a warning or you can be an example. And I hope today you get to learn a little bit more about how to not paint with a set piece that isn't anchored. I don't know if you'll ever be in that type of a situation, but how often are you in a situation where if you would have thought a little bit more, you could have prevented some challenges? Because prior planning prevents present problems. You may have heard this before, but it's so true. I hope that today you got some value. And if you did, feel free to like and subscribe. Continue to connect with me. God bless, guys. We'll see you next Thursday. Bye.